title of my talk today is The Capitalist Transformation, from Discourse to Database. Now, we hear about Lacan in the Discourse of Capitalism, and the subtitle of this conference is none other than the phrase, "Perhaps it is rotten after all," which is, of course, a reference to Lacan's fifth discourse that he mentioned at his 1972 seminar in Italy. So I'll start here with a quote from Levi Bryant, a writer on psychoanalytical theory and a blogger for larval subjects. He mentions that discourses should not be understood as eternal platonic forms characterizing all social relations, but rather as historical entities that come to be and pass away in time. Now, why did he mention this? It was again in response to Lacan's theory of the fifth discourse, the perversion of the discourse of the master that happened in the 20th century. During those times also, it was said that the discourse of the analyst had only recently been founded with Freud, although some would argue that Socrates and Buddha used a similar method. So in the 20th century, the analyst was born, the master died, and the capitalist took off. But now, let's discuss our main topic. Capitalism. Japan's Akihabara district in all its glory. Billboards, advertisements, neon lights, electronics, the hustle and bustle of people doing their businesses between all of those. And we have toys, cartoons, people in costumes, advertisements of people in costumes, maid costumes, cat ears, white eyes, colored hair. And the main raison d'etre, the beating heart of this place, are things like these. Anime. The Japanese content industry that spawns off tons of colorful plastic, and more plastic. The plastic of its pilots and its robots. This anime is called Neon Genesis Evangelion, and you can see the huge red cross back there that implies its strong biblical undertones. In fact, it's a story about how in 2015 they found the remnants of the biblical Adam and tried to clone him, hence inviting tons of monsters called angels to rain down on Earth and trying to kill off everybody. And it is up to these teenage piloted robots called Eva or Eve to kill the angels. It is that twisted, and it's definitely not for kids. Japanese media theorist Otsuka Eiji has mentioned that commodities are entry points to a larger universe. What he means by this, or what he calls narrative consumption, is that it doesn't matter where you start, the screen or the paper or the plastic, you are essentially consuming the same thing, only through different modules. And this same thing will get you hooked and obsessed to consume all the other modules, an infinite number of them, to complete your participation and identification with the universe you are consuming. Except that there is no universe, only database, said Hiroki Azuma, a theorist after Eiji. According to Azuma, after the age of Gundam, nobody bothered to make a consistent universe anymore. It's just too much work and there's no need. All that is needed are repetitions of the images of those wide-eyed sexy characters and sleek awesome giant robots, and you can basically slap them anywhere you want and you're good to go, which is why we have things like these. From coffee mugs to coffee themselves, the stupid bubblegum cat with plastic robot heads, right up the chocolate cake with faces of the monsters on them. That's the pilot Oscar Langley, by the way, holding a weapon from the films right there, to be used to slice the cake. Ain't that neat? Now all these have absolutely nothing to do with consuming any kind of meaningful narrative or coherent universe from those Evangelion franchise. It's just sexy images slapped onto daily objects. Now if you think this trend only applies to contemporary Japanese quirkiness, then obviously you haven't seen these. The Beatles. Who doesn't know them? And on the other hand, who knows them but don't really know their music? There's a huge discrepancy in numbers between people who has heard of them and people who actually listens to their music. I don't know most of their music, but I can spot their images from a mile away. Because they're basically everything. Coffee mugs, Monopoly games, handbands, memorabilia on a museum cruise, even data art of their daily activities, such as this poster of their work schedule from 1963 to 1966. Basically, you can milk every single thing out of them and turn it into a commodity. In fact, Hiroki Azuma said that today, as an artist, you shouldn't take your artwork, be it your music, your stories, and so on, you shouldn't take them more seriously than those coffee mugs, because that's all they are, merchandise. This means that surplus value today is no longer labor value implied in an object, but database value, how much an object is connected to a familiar or narcissistic database. The object cause of desire in commodities is completely detached from the labor of the other and instead attaches itself to networks of repetitions of similar images. Each object, each commodity then, is merely a module of a virtually infinite database, an infinite pool of the object cause of desire reflecting back on itself. This exploration of infinity is what capitalism is. The commodity is merely the entry points to the network, a network that is more or less shaped like this. Rhizomes, or nonlinear structures. Our whole world today is characterized by nonlinearity. In fact, I would claim that the narcissistic feminine enjoyment of partaking in a narrative now becomes the enjoyment of partaking in a database. Take the joy of partaking on the internet, for example. Now, I don't know what those colors mean, but this chaotic topology looks about right to me. Hypertext does not have a beginning and an end, and the only way to topologize it is to make everything interconnected. Like Pokemon. In Pokemon, everything is interconnected. You can check out the posters, watch the show, collect the trading cards, play the old school games to the new ones, collect the toys, and you always wind up with the same monsters. Even on keychains, and again, cakes. Again, multiple entry points, single database, no matter which one you're consuming. There's a peculiar thing about the cake though, and I'm not talking about the fact that it's dedicated to Brock instead of Ash. I'm talking about its similarity to things like these. Jesse and James of Team Rocket, the slapstick antagonists of Pokemon, the girl with the awesome hair. Now, what do all these works have in common? The image is shown here that is similar to the cake back on the previous slide. To put it simply, these are images that are made and circulated in places like these. This is Japan's Comiket, or comic market. Not unlike other comic conventions around the world, this is a place where fans gather several times per year to trade things that are made by fans and for fans, such as Pokemon artworks back on the previous slide, and more things like these. Cosplays or costume plays, and doujinshis or fan-made comic books. As you probably noticed, most of them are not safe for work. I had to strategically place that picture of cross-dressing cosplayers to cover up the more racy bits. But my point here is the following one. It is very clear that in capitalism today, the injunction is no longer to consume but to produce, be they collections, items, characters, images, things to continuously add into the database. What is invisible must be made visible. What is unwritten must be written. And doesn't this exact same injunction precisely in place with things like Facebook? And this is a Facebook timeline, or the story we tell about our lives. Everything that we and our friends do gets inscribed into a database and becomes our own consumption, our own mode of narcissistic enjoyment. And is this a commodity? Like hell it is. The way to monetize a database keep on going. Sponsored posts, targeted ads, customized printing services, digital currency sold at Walmart, and even stupid games whose items could cost you over 10 grand. That's a real prompt, by the way, although I don't think anyone has ever brought a premium cow before. It's one of those satirical games which is, to be enjoyed ironically and so on. And again, value creation in the information economy does not stem from labor, but from digitization and modularization. This is why I disagree with the leftists who criticize Facebook and other social networks as exploiting and soliciting free labor. Informatization is always already commodification, so all traditional notions of labor as value creation goes out the window. This also means that production and consumption becomes a singular activity, writing, and requires no object except one's own relation with things already present in one's life. Take, for example, Instagram. Our relationship with food has developed to such a level that it is not only something we consume, but also something with which our relationship helps define who we are and thus must be turned into an image and shared so that it is consumed. This is how we enjoy food today, so much so that it becomes an injunction. Because it is no longer about looking in the mirror and feeling good about oneself. It is looking at the timeline and feeling good about one's own life. The nature of the database and its network screens, I claim, presents entirely new dimensions of identity and misrecognition, from the mirror image to the avatar. And we are told to make it more complete, to write more and more about it. What is going on in our lives, what we think of certain things, where we are and what we're eating. And the one motive for sure we can find among all this is the fact that today, capitalism never proclaims truths, but only asks questions. Which is why it cannot be put precisely in the traditional schematics of the four discourses. It produces the object A, but the subject is not subsumed under any master signifier. The subject itself is the agent. But it's not a discourse of the hysteric, since it has to produce object causes of desire like the master discourse does. Which is why in 1972 Lacan introduced to us the discourse of the capitalist. Precisely like the discourse of the master, but with an inversion of the agent and its condition of possibility, its truth. The subject, made possible by the master signifiers in the database, puts science and technology to work to produce object causes of desire. Now it looks perfect. Why this inversion? Because the subject tries to consume itself so that it is consumed, not unlike how we consume our own life and social networks so that it is consumed. And as you can see also, what appears to be a breaking of the cycle of the order of the four elements is in fact just a change in perspective. The tetrahedric topology of the quadruped is perfectly maintained. Philip Boxer of Lacanticals wrote that these discourses are perverse because they try to define the subject primarily by its relation to the epistemic rather than the ontic, attempting to reverse the global dependency of the particular on the universal. This reversal tries to repress the entanglement of the subject's global with the non-local context and attempts to assert the subject's absolute sovereignty over his or her identity. When looked at it that way, it is of course a perversion of the master discourse. But is it really headed for a blowout, as Lacan said? Is it not precisely because with modularization the particular is now independent from the universal, hence able to avoid blowouts, since chaos is held at the surface level and not the database level? Recall the graph of the internet in my presentation earlier. For an uninformed reader, such a topology would look as if it is exploding. But in fact, this fractality is a mere feature of its nonlinear nature and in no way indicates instability. What if this reversal of positions, this mutation of the master discourse, is also a feature of today's digitized subjective positions? So now my questions would be, why did the reversal happen? What caused it? And is it really a perversion or is it something more organic and natural? My first interrogative reasoning goes at the reversal of the epistemic and ontic positions of the subject, the non-dependence of the particular on the universal, the subject's sovereignty over its identity. Aren't all these fundamental features of the database instead of a forced perversion by the industry? Can't we simply see this in the example cases of industry and social networks we saw earlier? And could it be that the reversal as such is not a perversion but a natural progression? A direct effect on the way we encounter today's hypertext in the post-Cartesian world. Now, I'm not exactly referring to Robert Stollerow's phenomenological contextualist approach to psychoanalysis, but simply the breaking of the universal particular axis in today's nonlinear digitized world. Lacan himself stated that with the discourse of the capitalist, we might be entering a new universe, and it makes sense if it is a post-Cartesian one he's referring to. And if we are entering a new universe, what will happen to the other discourses once technological advances put such a reversal in motion? Already, we can map out 3 entirely new discourses by reversing the agent and truth positions of the hysteric, the university, and the analyst. What will be gained and what will be lost in this new universe? What will become of those mutated discourses? What are they? It also means that there are and there will be significant progressions beyond postmodernity. If we are right, then the neo-Kantians are wrong. Technological advances like biogenetics do have a potential to alter something fundamentally human within us, and perhaps it is already happening as we speak. And to conclude Lacan and this discourse of capitalism, perhaps it is not rotten, but neither headed for a blowout after all. Perhaps it is merely the tip of the iceberg as what is to come, what we humans have coming right at us. That ends my lecture today, and thank you very much.